Yes, sir.
Great morning, everybody. I'm so excited to launch BMG4 with you today. For those of you that are new, I want to share with you our mission statement. So the mission is very simple. We're not here to pitch our business. We are here to empower each other through the leverage of knowledge to enhance ourselves, both personally and professionally. Now, you'll notice that majority of the topics are going to be professionally based. Today's topic is going to be on strategic social with Matt Gardner. I'm so excited to hear from him. I'm going to give him an introduction. But guys, just so you know, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to introduce Matt. We'll give him the floor for about 5 to 20 minutes, depending on how much time he needs. If you guys have any questions, I just ask that you go ahead and jot those down. As soon as Matt concludes, we'll open it up to Q&A. So if you have any questions, comments, stories, any concerns or questions, go ahead and use that time then. Again, we're not here to pitch our business, but this is underlyingly a networking group. So guys, please use that chat at the bottom, connect with some people, set up some calls. If you feel like somebody has a good energy or you guys click, use that to your advantage. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Matt. So Matt is an individual that I actually just recently met. And from the very beginning, you can tell Matt is just one of those genuine people. I mean, he's very open. He shares his story right off the jump. I really encourage you guys to get some time with him and listen to his story because, from first glance, you probably wouldn't assume it, but he's got an incredible story. And I think it's very important to know about it. So Matt is a very unique individual. He really helps coaches and he is extremely proficient with the networking side of the world. So for those of you guys that don't know, LinkedIn is actually the #1 business platform for social media. It's the second highest used social media platform of all of them, the first being Facebook. And Matt is an absolute whiz when it comes to strategically using these social platforms. So whether this is personally or professionally, I think you guys are going to get a ton of value out of this. But without further ado, Matt, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Keegan. So great to be here. Very excited about sharing with you the topic of strategic social. So what the heck does that even mean? How do we be strategic in our social media presence? And from a networking standpoint, it's about gaining referrals and building valuable relationships because we're on social media for a reason. And sometimes that reason can be different. Sometimes it's for credibility and awareness and exposure. You're building up your brand. You want people to know that you're the expert, the go-to expert in your area. That's great. That's fine. You can definitely use it in that way. Most business owners, when I talk to them, that's important, but their short-term concern is, hey, I need to speak with more people that are in my target audience, either potential clients or future clients or centers of influence. So the focus today is going to be around how do you fill up your calendar with those types of conversations using a networking based approach, being strategic on social media so that you can gain referrals and build valuable relationships. Now, what I'm going to discuss can be used on all forms of social media because ultimately we're there to be social, we're there to build relationships. So Instagram, Facebook are applicable, but I'm going to spend most of the time, if not all the time, talking specifically about LinkedIn. But just know the same tactics can be used in a similar, or the same strategies rather, can be used in a similar fashion on other social platforms. It's just a different feel because on LinkedIn, for instance, is much more professional. So if it's more professional, that requires a more professional approach when you're greeting, feeding, and meeting new people on LinkedIn. That's going to look different than on Facebook, for instance. So we're going to keep it focused on LinkedIn because this is a professional networking group. And I'm very excited to jump into it. So just by show of hands, how many of you are currently active on LinkedIn? Pretty well everyone. Okay, that's fantastic. So the thing with LinkedIn, and I've had a lot of success in the last 5-6 months working as a LinkedIn networking strategist with a company called Evergreen Networking. I have the privilege of working with a gentleman named Joe Apfelbaum, who's been a LinkedIn trainer for 10 years because he has a multi-million-dollar digital marketing firm, over 35,000 followers on LinkedIn. And the bulk of what I've learned about being a networking strategist on LinkedIn, it has come from being mentored and coached by Joe directly, one-on-one, virtually every day for the last 5 or 6 months. So it's coming from a place of tried, tested, and true. It's worked for him for a decade, and it's really worked well for me in the last 5, 6 months. It's been actually just over 5 months since I began my contract with Evergreen, and I've generated over $40,000 in revenue using these processes. And it's greeting, feeding, meeting. It's having real conversations with real people. You don't have to be a superstar. You don't need 35,000 followers. I've built it now. I have over 5,000 followers, which essentially means 5,000 connections. I know maybe 10% of them at best, because my previous history on LinkedIn was what not to do, right? Spamming, sending pitches, all this stuff, I learned trial by fire, but I realized, hey, that stuff doesn't work. It works in some niches. If someone's more transactional, if they're looking to not necessarily have a deep connection with someone. For example, I worked in merchant services, very transactional, literally and metaphorically. So it didn't matter. I could just reach out, pitch people, and they either wanted it or they didn't. But when you're working with solopreneurs, you really need that know, like, and trust factor. So that's what I want to talk about today. Now, if you're going to be strategic on social, if you're going to be strategic with your LinkedIn approach, you need to know who your audience is, like who are you looking to meet. So let's do a little bit of interaction here. And because of the time frame, we've got about 20 minutes total. I'll go quick and I'll kind of moderate this. But I'd like to know from each of you, who's the ideal person that you're looking to meet? And that could either be a future client or a center of influence, meaning a center of influence is someone that could refer you a future client. So just really quick, if you don't know, I'll do a little bit of coaching around that because it's really important. But let's just kick it off with you, Keegan. Who are the most important people for you to meet in your social strategy right now?
Currently, white collar millennials.
White collar millennials. So how? Okay, may I coach you a little bit on that?
Yeah.
So white collar millennials, well, how would you identify that when you're actually reaching out to people on LinkedIn? Like, do they have a specific job title? Are they a business owner? Are they like a director? Like, how do you identify a white collar millennial?
So there are 4 particular verticals that I look within. One is sales, marketing, real estate, and financial advisors. Those are the 4 sweet spots. So I look for people in those particular industries that would be a millennial.
That's cool. That's great. So just by show of hands, does anyone know either of those 4 categories? Anyone in those industries? A couple people. So what are we going to do here? Actually, we're going to do a LinkedIn group chat. I'm going to do that at the end so that it's easy to stay connected, but it's also easy to make introductions, because if you're going to build a business strategically, starting virtually from the ground up, or maybe you have a little bit of a network, you have to be very proactive in making introductions, not necessarily referrals. There's a difference between referrals and introductions. Referrals is pretty well like, hey, I've got someone that's probably going to do business with you. I'm going to introduce you. Hallelujah. We all want those, right? Of course. But an intro is someone, hey, this could be a client. Maybe there's some synergy, like Joe Rojas introduced Keegan and I think. I don't know. That might, anyway, I know we're connected that way. And it wasn't because, I'm going to be Keegan's client or vice versa. It's because, hey, there might be some collaboration, and there is. Obviously, I'm here. So it's creating intros. Probably 10 to 20% of the intros you make or receive will actually result in business. The others will be great networking partners. And I suggest having a dream list of at least 100 to 150 of introduction partners or networking partners that are in your niche. So like, even if Keegan starts networking with financial advisors, that doesn't necessarily mean that person he's speaking with is going to be the right fit, but they might know someone. But you have to be proactive. So if I'm Keegan and I'm speaking to Joe, the financial advisor, and Joe's like, hey, I've hired some coaches, I'm actually really good right now. Well, that's cool. And we've built some rapport. But hey, Joe, do you have like any colleagues that would actually, maybe they're just curious about the advantage of coaching, or they've seen you grow? Like, would they be interested in learning about that a little bit? And then Joe's going to think, yeah, obviously he knows somebody. Well, I'd love to meet them. That's what Keegan would say. I'd love to meet them, not to pitch them, not to sell them, but to have a conversation And that's essentially how I've generated over 40K in revenue in the last 5 months, is by taking that strategic approach. So Patty, let's just kick it over to you. Is there one particular type of person that would be really important for you to meet?
Well, my business, there's two different facets, but I would say where my focus is entrepreneurs that are looking to build that extra stream of income. And for me, they have to be health conscious.
That's cool. So when we look at something like LinkedIn, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. Like if I do a search on LinkedIn and look for entrepreneur, I'll get millions. So I gotta specify that down a little bit, even if it's by like region, right? Like my local area. Most of the people that I initially brought on board with Evergreen all happen to be from Toronto, because somewhere in my network, and then I was just magnetizing people from Toronto for some reason. So it's a good idea to start in your local area or where you went to school. For example, we're working with a coach right now. She's not so much focused on where she lives, which is in Illinois, but her college that she went to, because she wants to work with directors that have a liberal arts degree. And so she's starting with people that went to her college. Why? Because know, like, and trust. You want to start with some common ground. Like we're all on LinkedIn. Okay, that's common ground, but can we get a little bit more common, right? Like your local area, right? If I network with people in Toronto, typically they're a little bit more receptive. And then when I jump on Zoom, because I'm so used to speaking to people in the US, there's a common bond to just kick off the conversation that way. So it could be entrepreneurs in, XYZ locale. At least that narrows it down a little bit more. And you could get more specific, but that's a general idea. How about you, Josh? Who are your ideal people?
So I'm with males 25 to 40 years old with in similar verticals as Keegan there, that are in sales, that are in IT, things like that. So I look in those sectors as far as the males go.
That's great. So like sales, like business development people, account executives, they're easy to identify. IT professionals, they're easy to identify. Again, you can get a general age range when you're looking at the photo or looking at their experience. You can narrow it down by city just to make it more selective. And then in taking that approach, it's really essential to do the greeting, feeding, and meeting method if you're going to approach them on LinkedIn from a cold network. So there's some strategies there. I think I'm actually going to share my networking one sheet in a minute here and kind of show, like, when you meet someone, this is a great tool that you can bring into that conversation. It's a topic to start a conversation, but it's also a great way to tell that person how you can best support them and how they can best support you. Jackson, who are your ideal people?
So I work in the cannabis industry, and my team and I just got our license to cultivate up in Michigan. So we're going to be harvesting and packaging our product to be sold wholesale to dispensary and processing partners in Michigan. So dispensary owners and processing owners is who I'm looking for.
Great. Well, when I worked in merchant services, I was in the cannabis industry specifically. So that's a little different because whilst you might find some cannabis dispensary owners on LinkedIn, they're kind of old school in terms of how they do business. A lot of them are still doing cash, like they've got like $100,000 of cash. They're moving around. It's crazy. So for them, still the same principles apply in the sense that you got to build up that connection standpoint, but you got to just call them, you got to email them, you got to get their contact info, and you got to build that Trade 100 list, and you got to follow up 5 to 12 times minimum. And the thing I was going to say to Josh that would also apply to Keegan is for 90 days, if you commit to one niche, it develops this really great power and momentum in your messaging and your message to market match when you're doing your outreach. Because like if you're doing financial advisors and real estate people, for example, the messaging might be slightly different, or your outreach strategy, like the brain can really, when you just say, hey, I'm just doing this and I'm going to do this every day for 90 days, it's really easy to gain momentum. But if you're like switching gears or switching audiences, every like day or every week or whatever, it can cause some level of confusion in terms of what you're actually doing, and you can lose momentum that way. So we advise just going all out for 90 days with one niche, and you'll have a lot of success with that. Obviously in cannabis, you just dispensaries in Michigan, I'm just going to call them. I'm going to get their emails. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to be relentless because they are very transactional. And you really have to paint that picture in terms of like, what's the benefit? So periphery view, because I'm sure there's more depth to your business there, Jackson, but I appreciate you sharing there, brother.
Thank you.
How about you, Dylan? What's your main audience?
Yeah, sure. Pleasure to meet you, Matt. Thanks for doing this. I mostly am focused on wanting to meet other individuals who are strong connectors, other strong networkers, right? And then if I had to get more specific, my focus has been recently shifted toward young professionals who are looking to get more active in the stock market.
Sweet. That's cool. That would require a little bit of narrowing, but like, for example, people that are working like as a financial advisor or manager might be better because they probably have some money. If they're now a manager, they've like been promoted. They're typically really interested in the stock market, and they're in the 25 and 35 range. So that's the way you can approach that. And then when you approach it saying, hey, like I'm putting together a mastermind group and we're talking about how to increase your financial portfolio through options trading or whatever, that's going to automatically ignite excitement. And that's a really easy way to start building a funnel with those people. Okay, so for time, I'm going to share my one sheet here so you guys can see this. And this is a great way. We actually have a template for this for our students inside the Evergreen networking system. But essentially, we break it down to a few different sections, like what's your introduction? So bam, you just put it right on there. Now that's more for like when you send this to someone so they can get more of an in-depth view of what you're doing. What are your current projects and priorities? This section, these next two sections are the most important. Centers of influence. So for me, my most important ones, I'm actually going to update this because coaches are pretty good, but the most important ones for me are actually fractionals, fractional VPs of sales and fractional CFOs. And so I'm building a network with those folks, as well as another title called EOS implementers. And those three groups, they also, they're great referrals for one another. They're great introduction partners for one another. So that's essentially my goal for 2022 is to build up a referral network of 100 to 150 of these people where I can regularly make introductions. And anytime I meet one of them, I'm automatically coming into the conversation with value. So I'm not asking for anything up front. I'm connecting to serve. And then on the back end, I can say, hey, who do you know that fits XYZ? And I'm able to provide service for those people as well as introduce them. So there's multiple ways that I can be of support. So that's really important and significant. And then how do you introduce people? How do you introduce yourself, or how do you allow other people to introduce you? If you just have a blurb, right? Because otherwise, if someone doesn't send me something, I just take their LinkedIn headline and boom, I throw that in an email, and that's usually fine. But if you have something a little bit more succinct, it just looks more polished. So that's a great thing. I'm going to actually update this later today or later this week, and I'll tag you guys in that so that we can have a conversation on LinkedIn, and we'll get I can get your feedback on it as well. One thing I want to do too, Keegan, because I think we're close to the 20-minute mark. Am I right?
Yes. Okay,
so I want to do a group chat because this is really valuable. And what we can do in here is everyone can jump in on this. I'll show you guys how to do that if you don't know. And then you can jump in and say, hey, I'm looking to meet this type of person. And if you know that type of person, then you guys can have a conversation with one another. So that's really valuable. So I've got Keegan in here, and I've got Jen in here, because Jen and I, we know one another from age 7. And so you can only do a group chat if you're a first degree connection. I'll just call this Keegan's Mastermind for ease. And then I'll just say hello. And what that'll do now is it'll activate the group chat. And because I'm not connected with the rest of you guys yet on LinkedIn, but I will be in the very near future, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up. I'm pretty sure it's the 3 dots here. And I'm going to click on add remove people. And right over here, I can turn on this link that'll allow others to be invited into the chat. And then I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to throw it into the chat box on Zoom. And so you guys can go there and you can jump in on the chat, and you just, you'll be automatically added. And then you can just say hello. And then afterwards, after the mastermind or whatever later today, just put in like, who are you looking for, right? Like if Keegan's saying, hey, I'm looking to meet, realtors that have been in business for at least 5 years. And, they're like 35 to 40, or they're, 30 to 35, whatever. And then if you know someone that might be in that range, then you just reach out, and you can either, jump on a quick call to get the specifics, or you can just make an email intro. And this is a really great way just to keep the introductions going for one another and stay top of mind, because you're meeting here every week, which is great. But in between meetings, how do you continue that support? This is a great way to go about that. So that's pretty well what I wanted to cover with you guys, being very strategic in terms of your audience. I know I didn't chat with a few of you, so I definitely look forward to doing that, learning more about your businesses. But just by show of hands, did you guys gain value from this presentation? Did you learn some new things? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Keegan, a real great pleasure to present to your group, man. And thanks so much. I really enjoyed presenting.
Matt, thank you so much for the information. I think you brought up a lot of really important things. And, some of this is relatively broad, but it's also really actionable items that we can all do today. So again, what I mean by that is that I've really seen two approaches, and I also know Joe Applebaum as well. And one of the things that he talks about is that, when we talk about these two approaches, it is, you can start anywhere. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Matt, but I believe he says the average person has about 770 LinkedIn connections. Is that right?
Yeah. So the average CEO has around like 900, and the average user has like between 400 and 500.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, I bring that up because everybody's probably starting at a different point. I didn't actually myself get active on LinkedIn until this year. So this is a new thing for me still too. But you really brought up two big things. And the one is the knowing your avatar, which is so critical. And I really love the concept that you've brought up about being hyper focused for 90 days and seeing where that gets you. So again, I would challenge a lot of people to do that. I myself am going to do that over the next 90 days. So we'll talk about that, Matt. But the second part, and again, Joe has two approaches here, but the one pager, I've seen it been done both ways. I've seen it done where people have an email script, they keep it in a Word doc, they gain a new connection, they shoot it over in an email as a follow-up, really simple. The other one that Matt presented to us today is the one pager. And the one pager, it's very clear and concise, right? Of course, the whole premise is to be one page because we want it to be easy. We don't want people to have to read a lot. So I love both of those points, but I would like to open it up to the group and see if you guys have any particular questions that we can kind of run with.
So I'll start off with a question, Matt. And Keeg, since you just kind of restarted this year on LinkedIn, I've had LinkedIn for years and I have not used it properly at all. First to admit that, right? Didn't know exactly how to use it. Certainly was not strategic in this regard. So now with intention, going after an audience, doing this, is it better to restart, clear out, delete, start over, keep going, just, with new focus? How do you kind of restart on LinkedIn, having not used it properly in the past, and now moving forward with amazing, focus and intent and some strategy behind it? How do you feel?
Great question, Josh. So and just for clarity, like if you've got all the wrong connections, all the wrong industries, is it better just to start fresh, create a new account, or do I run with what I have? That's the question, right?
Yes, sir. Correct.
So that's where I came from, because I used automated systems. I used everything. I was trying to find all the shortcuts in the past. None of it worked, but actually I shouldn't say none of it worked. Some of it worked, but it was in merchant services, very transactional. It came to actually building real relationships. None of it worked. But there are advantages to having a certain number of connections. So, because it just gives you a little bit more credibility, just a little bit. It's not an end all be all. But for example, when I started, 5 months ago, I had, around 4,500 connections, something like that. And because I've been so strategic now in the last 5 months, I only have 500 or so new connections. But they're higher quality and I'm having actual conversations with them. You want to have at least 500 connections, because then you have that 500 plus. It's kind of like a badge. I mean, if you see someone with less than that, everything creates an image in your mind, right? So for example, too, like having LinkedIn Premium, when you see someone has that badge, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to invest in your services, just because they're paying, $50 to $100 a month for LinkedIn. Of course, you don't necessarily want to judge people on that, but you can also prioritize, who am I going to outreach to? Because they got LinkedIn Premium, they've got over 500 connections, they've posted in the last 30 days. So, it's better to keep your existing account and just revamp the about section, the title, all that. It doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, meaning it doesn't make any difference, like starting over. You're actually kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage if you start from scratch with a new account.
Okay.
I have a question. So, I love that idea of focusing for 90 days, but I'm looking for entrepreneurs, but I'm establishing myself as a health professional, knowing what I know. So, that's what I've been a little bit more focused on in my post. So would it be all right to rotate between, somebody that's going to help you build a stream of income, residual income, and then still, because I'm still trying to get that trust factor up and that people understand that I'm knowledgeable in my field?
I'm with you. Yeah, both are important. In that case, it's probably like an 80-20 rule. Like, is it a network marketing type of scenario? Yeah. So because there's in some people's minds, a negative connotation with that, it's really important to be very professional. And so how do you do that? It's not about, hey, open up a second stream of revenue and retire in 3 years. I'm being extreme. But your expertise, lead with the expertise 80% of the time in your conversations. Just lead with that. When you're greeting, feeding, and meeting, when you're opening up the door to have an actual conversation, it's just about health. It's just about energy. It's just about, is that something that's a priority for you right now? And not like, hey, let me show you this amazing thing that can solve all that for you. No, we're actually hosting a mastermind group where 6 or 12 of us come out every couple of weeks. We talk about ways to raise our energy and health and awareness of wellness. And is that something that would be valuable for you to come check out? Then when you already have buy-in from that and they're trusting you in that capacity, then you can start to say, hey, by the way, if you want to learn more about XYZ product, I'm going to host another webinar on that. And here's the link to register. So you want to create this velvet rope client journey for your people. And because if they smell like that person's in an MLM, they're going to try and sell me something, even though that may not be your intention. But if they see that, then they're going to, avoid you. But if you come across as genuinely being an expert in health and wellness and energy, and you've got a mastermind group established, and then it's really almost seems like a secondary thing where you're inviting people to be part of this business, and it feels more special. Like, hey, I don't do this for everyone, but it seems like this might be a good fit for you. Do you want to come check out, a VIP presentation that I put together? So it's kind of a different approach than I think what some of the typical marketing strategies are in that industry. And it works really well. I've discussed this strategy with many people and it's turned on light bulbs. So
Great, thank you.
Does that make sense, Patty?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Cool.
So I think a really good segue into that question that Patty just shared was that, Matt, we all hear the know, like, and trust when we are presenting ourselves on social media. And again, of course, we're talking about LinkedIn right now, but my question to you, and let's just focus on LinkedIn here for a second. What do you like to break that into? So I'm going to be very specific for some people. So what I mean by this is when we say know, like, and trust, a lot of people will say, well, look, you don't want to just do business the whole time. If you just do business posts 100% of the time, well, then they don't build that commonality, right? Because we're not getting the like and trust factor on the personal side. So my question to you is, what do you see as the advantageous breakdown between professional, personal, etc.?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say there's definitely distinctions between knowing, liking, and trusting. Finding that common ground straight away is great. So that's why an introduction is so wonderful, because that's borrowed trust. right? Like Joe Rojas, I met Joe Rojas. Joe Rojas knew Joe Apfelbaum, and Clayton Hicks introduced me to Joe Rojas. So when I'm speaking to Joe Rojas for the first time, there's some instant credibility there because of the connections. And then when I met you, Keegan, we had Joe Apfelbaum, Joe Rojas, other people. So there's instant credibility. So that to me is the best way to approach it. But if you're literally just starting cold, you got to still bring value. So how do I build that know, like, and trust factor? I discover, how can I actually bring value to someone when I'm on a conversation? Now, when I first started this 5 months ago with Evergreen, I was just talking to everyone in my network. And it wasn't until like a couple months ago that I realized fractional VPs of sales are a great referral partner for me, because they can refer me to their clients. I can introduce them to other people in my network that are advantageous. And then so I really started to dial it in. So now anytime I talk to a fractional VP of sales or fractional CFO, I've got 6 or 12 people I can introduce them to. So coming in with confidence into a conversation, to me, automatically builds up that magnetism when you're getting to know someone. Knowing that, like, hey, I know what fractional VPs of sales are doing, so I already know their business. That builds a no factor. And then there's a natural sense of trust, because like, this guy Matthew knows what he's talking about, so there's a natural sense of credibility. And then the like factor is like caring, right? Like, do I actually care about this relationship? Some people don't, right? I had a conversation with a guy that I've been nurturing, gave intros to. He's an executive coach, retired, a little bit cranky. And then, I had a conversation with him last week. He's like, you know what, Matthew? I decided to go with another company because they're cheaper. I'm like, what's that about? Like, what? Why would you do that? I'm going to use automated software instead because it's cheaper. That's cool though, because someone that's like that, having more of that transactional approach, like that know, like, and trust factor isn't there for me, right? It's not there for me. Like, I nurtured this relationship with this gentleman, and like, wow, he wouldn't be a very good client. So, sometimes when we're like in sales mode, we're like trying to get their know, like, and trust. But then what about our know, like, and trust? Like, he's not ticking my boxes, right? So it's important to stay empowered on our side of that know, like, and trust equation as well.
Thank you for elaborating. And that's such a critical point. I hope you guys are taking notes, but I mean, that's just huge. It's that, look, if we're in a relationship, and one of the things that I really like about social media, and you guys may disagree with me on this, but I personally think that, again, Matt's making the distinction between referrals and introductions, right? If I'm making a referral to somebody and I'm consecutively making referrals and I don't get any reciprocity whatsoever, I'm going to cut that off. And it's not that I'm being ignorant. It's that I am being very conscious of my time. If we're building and establishing the know, like, and trust, and I want to provide you value and referrals and impacts and things that are going to help your business, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do the exact same thing to return the favor, but there has to be some recognition, right? You can't just receive 5 referrals, expand your business, and not even send a gratitude email or a thank you or a follow-up of some fashion, and I think that that's something very important to establish. So when we talk about that know, like, trust, it goes deeper than just our presence on social media, but it's how do we leverage this? Even if you only have 300 connections, I'm sure that you might know one person that you could help introduce to Jackson in Michigan, maybe, you know what I mean? And that person might not 100% be affiliated with the cannabis industry per se, but if they're a business owner, or if they're having conversations as an investor or something of that nature, well, they might know people there. So it is, hey, look, this might not be the first referral. This is more of a networking introduction, but I do think that because this person knows X amount of people, or XYZ person, that's going to open doors to you. So one last thing, and then I'll turn it back to the group. But when I was I was a financial advisor, and at one point we were completely cold calling, right? So when you very first start out, you're building and expanding your book of business. So there was this one guy, and I'll never forget this. This guy worked at Mass Mutual. He wasn't the smartest guy. He actually literally, I don't even think, made it all the way through middle school. You know, and of course I'm saying this with no disrespect, but he wasn't the best looking guy in the room, right? Like he wasn't super well kempt. He like didn't have clean clothes. Like he wasn't a stud, but this guy had an unwavering tenacity to go out and make one sale every single day. So he would drive into these neighborhoods he'd never visited and would knock on doors all day long until he got one sale. And so the point that I'm making is that, you know, he would go relentlessly until he got that one sale. And one of his sayings was, just keep on knocking. Eventually that door is going to be open. And the same thing is true here when we're talking about strategically leveraging our social media, is that you might not close the deal or get a home run on that first conversation, but when you just keep knocking relentlessly, eventually that door is going to be open. So back to the group. Does anybody else have any questions or comments or thoughts for Matt?
Good morning. I do have a question. So I am one of those people who has not utilized LinkedIn. I think I made an account because someone somewhere along the line told me it would be a good idea, and I have it, and it's somewhat accurate and up to date, but something I should work on. But I think the reason I kind of remember LinkedIn is the thing is I get those emails and it says, oh, so-and-so is trying to reach out to you. And I guess since I don't know too much about LinkedIn, I'm curious of how much of, is spam mail really a thing? Because some of these things are obviously just a message you're sending out to a lot of people, but it's like, oh, I do have experience in what they're trying to, offer me. So I guess I'm just wondering if LinkedIn has a market of people who are kind of just, I guess, scam people, or if it is all like legit people actually.
Well, I don't know about scams. I mean, I'm sure there's some people doing that. Has anyone ever been approached by one of those Forex people? And
Yes.
they want you. Yeah, that's more on Facebook though. I don't think I've had that on LinkedIn, but now LinkedIn's done a really good job in the last 6 months or so, because you used to be able to do 100 new connection requests a day. And there was a lot of people using automation, just hammering out, DMs all day long, connection requests all day long. And I was one of them in the past, by the way. And then they cut that down to 100 a week. And the reason they did that is they were losing revenue. Premium subscribers were unsubscribing because they weren't happy with their experience, similar to what you're saying. Is it Carissa?
Yeah, Carissa.
So that used to be more of an issue. Now it's not as much of an issue. And I'll ask people, some people were really triggered by it. Like, I hate LinkedIn because people are just trying to sell me stuff all the time. I say, well, but if you look at the last 3-4 months, has it been as much? And they've always said, actually, no, it's less. But people have that past story, which, that's more Keegan's territory, probably, where you're carrying around the past with you instead of living in the present, but it's still prevalent with people's experience on LinkedIn. So I would say, yes, there are some people there's people that are genuinely prospecting on LinkedIn, which there's nothing wrong with that. That's a strategy. That's an approach. You need to do it appropriately. Most people don't. And that's why it comes across as spam, not a scam, but spam. Spam just means it's irrelevant. It's not, you don't know who I am. There's no like and trust, and you're trying to pitch me or sell me something. And I can clearly see you just sent me an automated message, right? And again, in some cases, could that work? Maybe, but it's really hard. If I'm reaching out to Keegan for the first time, if I have an automated message sequence going, I can't reference, I can put his name in there, but I can't put his business. I can't say, hey, I really appreciate your last post about XYZ. Like, I can't make it customized. So there are ways to kind of be a gatekeeper with your account and not like accept new connection requests that you don't know or that don't look interesting, for example. So there are ways to mitigate that. And LinkedIn's done a lot over the last 6 months to really cut out any form of spam, or at least reduce it heavily.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Carissa, I was going to add to that. Sorry, my camera won't turn back on for whatever reason. I hate technology. I definitely think, I'm on LinkedIn and in the inbox constantly. I see a lot of the spammy messages. For me, it's always, you're going to have a gut feeling whether or not it's being sent by a robot or a human. But also, if anybody's reaching out to you for the first time and the first thing they're doing is trying to sell you something, I don't care who sent it. Yeah, I don't have much interest. That's quite a mountain you have to climb to convince me to come and do something. Take me out to dinner first, right? So, I just wanted to say, regardless of who it's coming from, yeah, there's been more and more of these automated messages, and Matt is awesome that he admitted that he was doing them too, because guess what? They did work when LinkedIn didn't make the changes that they made. So I am happy to say that it seems to be shifting in the direction Matt said, but regardless of who it's coming from, if somebody's trying to sell you something before even trying to get to know you, that's, for me, I'm out. On to the next one.
Very good point. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'll add in that we also tried to go to an automated program that's offered here locally. And they really talked about how you had the ability to customize. And in doing that, you could make it feel more personal. And so we signed up, and I very much knew that it was going to be a limited time. We're going to see how this goes. If it's not working, we're going to pull it. And we signed up with them. And within the first 2 weeks, I had a one-on-one with an individual I met at an in-person event. Loved her, couldn't wait to have the one-on-one with her. And the first thing she said, I think one of your guys reached out to me. And I said, oh yeah, that was probably Tyler. And she said, yeah, do you guys use that company? And I said, we do. She goes, yeah, it's pretty much the exact same message that we send out. And so they were using it as well. And they immediately saw that, and that was rough. So we did give it one more chance by switching it to someone else's seat that's not in the Indy area within my company, to see if there was any benefit to it. But she's had it for about a week and already had some complaints on it. So, I definitely, I think we look for different ways to reach out. But I'll say from my experience, I've definitely seen it's more just about being the person that you are, and taking the time to reach out and make those true valuable connections. And those will go a lot further than any type of automation, for sure.
Right on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I just want to comment on that, Jen. Because those tools, like Dylan said, in the past, you could get away with it. Pre-pandemic, it was okay. And again, depending on the niche or the industry, but now, man, we're post-pandemic, at least in terms of, people are still dealing with all the consequences of that. But we want to jump on Zoom. We want to have a real conversation. And if we don't get that vibe right away, there's a million fish in the sea. So why am I going to focus on that when, now, if you're more like me, I'm kind of forgiving at times, and I'll still go in there and I'll check it out and I'll see, hey, is there potential here? But I don't have time to do that with everyone. Fortunately, I personally have not gotten an automated message in months. And I think that has something to do with how I'm filtering my connection requests, because if the person looks like they're trying to sell me something, I just don't even accept. I just ignore. I don't block them or anything. I just ignore it, because if you block and flag people, then that can potentially get them suspended, which that happens with those accounts that are using automation. And it is outside of LinkedIn's guidelines. So I'm not condemning those companies, but it's not in LinkedIn's terms to use automation, and you're risking your account. It could potentially be suspended. I actually had mine suspended, thank God, for only a 24-hour period with one of those companies. And then I just realized, this is probably not what I need to be doing. So, and guess what? You know what? If you build that relationship organically and you're strategic and you're putting in quality over quantity, you can be just as effective, if not way more effective. LinkedIn, at minimum, if you're doing it correctly, $100,000 a year in revenue. If you're doing it correctly, depending on your niche, right? If you're selling $100 products, but if your average ticket is like $2,000 to $5,000, you can be definitely scaling in a year or two, if you're doing it correctly, to make $100,000 a year using LinkedIn. And we have case studies where people have added 10 to 20,000 a month in revenue using the strategies. And it depends where they are in their business development, their network. So not all results are the same and as quickly. But the strategy is the strategy, and it's because we're building relationships with real people.
Hey, Matt, I have a question, or I guess maybe it's more of a comment. You mentioned that just because they're sending these automated messages, what's unfortunate is I've seen some of these automated messages that, guess what? They're damn good. Like, I'm intrigued. I want to respond, but I know I was one of 100 people, if not more, who received it. So I'll play. I've done this before. I'm not encouraging other people to do this, but I've played with them a little bit. If there's a message that I really like that I could use for my business, I know it was sent by a computer, but I'll respond back. I'll say, hey, Matt, thanks for sending. Quick question. How many other people got this message? And I'll give them the opportunity to tell me straight up, hey, if they say, hey, listen, you know what, we do utilize this automated system because it helps our reach, but we think we got a really great product here, I'll give them a shot. But more often than not, you send that message back, hey, how many other people got this same message? Why am I supposed to feel special here? They won't answer. Guess what? Because it's a robot, or they don't feel like having to do this dance with me, and it's not worth it. What's sad is they're waiting for these responses. They're paying for these responses, and you get them sometimes, and they're not even there for it. So I'm not saying mess around, but I guess what I've kind of taught myself is to not rule every single automated message out, because there are good businesses that are just using that because it makes the most sense. So I just wanted to put that out there as well, in kind of a way that I've been able to actually break through one or two of them by just trying to make them human. It is an automated response, but if it's getting a response from you, that's going to a human most of the times now, and they're going to have the chance for them to respond. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's great contrast, Dylan. I mean, it's not that there's anything inherently wrong with automation. Like, we understand why people do it is because they're trying to streamline to actually have a real conversation. I mean, that's why I was doing it, because I love connecting. I think where it is if someone's more transactional in their approach, often automation can be a reflection of that. Not always, but in a lot of cases. So I love your approach. And I would take a similar stance in terms of like, hey, there's a real human being there that has something of genuine value. Maybe there's some synergy, and I want to explore that, because why leave a rock unturned?
Absolutely.
Hey, real quick, to go kind of back to the know, like, and trust kind of thing, we touched on that a little bit. I've always been curious with the lack of professionalism sometimes on post. And I know this kind of comes down to just your personal thing. Can you kind of expand on like how professional LinkedIn is kind of geared towards, and how non-professional people use it, and the balance of, having connections where people know you, like you, building that, but also it is a professional social net. If you want to go to Instagram, or, I mean, there's so many other platforms to post your baby, or like, whatever else. And I'm not saying I don't ever want to hear that, but that was just one I just saw the other day, and a not very great picture. It was just so random. I was like, this is so far from professional, it's not even funny. But I'm so glad you had a baby, or you got a new whatever. Like, I'm not opposed to any of it. It just seemed like it was nowhere close to being, hey, we have a beautiful new addition to our family, we're taking some time off, we're still working hard, whatever. It was nowhere close to that. So what's the fine line of keeping it professional? Here's some cool things I do, and you can relate or kind of connect with me on different levels. What do you see as it's kind of used for, or should be the balance, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Josh. So like, what is that balance of like, what is professional, what's too stuffy, what's too corporate, but what's too private, or what's too personal? Basically, any post you do on LinkedIn, you could virtually do anything, as long as you always link it back to business, right? And obviously that has to be done in the right context. So you can post like you gave a great example, post your newborn, and then like, how does that fulfillment of having a newborn child encourage you to serve more in your business? How did it open your heart to have a greater level of empathy with human beings? And then the know, like, and trust factor is obviously going to be built, or you're going to have more credibility when you do something like that. Like Joe Apfelbaum, on Friday, there was a snowstorm in his area, and he ended up missing a few really important calls because his assistant was also sick or something like that. But he had a snow day with his kids and they built snowmen. So he took a photo of three of his kids and a snowman that they built. And he referenced how he missed some calls, but what he's taking, the action steps he's taking to make up for that. And it was a great post, right? But if you just posted him and his kids with a snowman, yeah, it's cute, but it's not necessarily relevant. But he made it very relevant. So like you could post, hey, we made this beautiful dinner tonight. That's a Facebook thing, but then link it back like, what's the value to you in building relationships with people you meet on LinkedIn over dinner? And then you have a selfie with you and them at the restaurant or something like that. That's essentially how you tie it into being more professional.
Right on.
One thing I really like about what you said there, Matt, is that we can look, if we're a business owner and we have all these multiple platforms of social media, we can repurpose content. We just may have to readjust or malleate the actual messaging. So the content, the picture, the concept, we can use that on all platforms. It's just that we may have to tailor the messaging a little bit. And I think that's important. Look, guys, we're getting really close to the end. And Matt, one last thing that I really thought was relevant, and I know you mentioned sharing this before, but I want to express how valuable the one pager is that Matt shared with everybody. I would highly recommend putting one together. So Matt, I was curious if you could just share a couple tips or tricks or pointers on that one pager. And then as a group collectively, just for an action item, guys, I'd love if everybody would kind of comprise their own between now and the next session. And that way you have an actionable item that's actually going to really help move your business forward. So Matt, if you could just touch on a couple of the key points for the one pager, I think that'd be really valuable.
Yeah, for sure. So let me just run through it again really quick here. So the most two important sections are the centers of influence you're looking to meet and how to be introduced. Because if you say like, just to bring it back to like, hey, I'm looking to meet entrepreneurs. Well, there's millions of them. So my brain doesn't know who to look for. But if I say, hey, I'm looking to build to meet fractional VPs of sales, do you have any of them in your network? That's a yes or no. Like I have an image in my mind of what that looks like. Or hey, I'm looking to meet executive coaches. Do you know any? Right? I'm looking to meet fractional CFOs. Do you know any? I'm looking to meet EOS implementers. Do you know any? I'm looking to meet IT professionals that they're mid-level managers or they're directors in an IT company or they're directors of sales in a software company. Do you know it? It's either a yes or no. Or if they're like, well, I've got 5,000 connections in my network on LinkedIn, let me go look for directors of sales. Now I can actually go into my network. And that's what we do in H7, which if you guys aren't part of that, you should definitely speak either to Keegan or Jen. I'm not sure how Keegan's involved with H7, but that's a great network where Clay Hicks has got a great strategy for actually appropriately making introductions. And the other two components of the one sheet are 30-second intro. So this is more for the person you're sending it to, just so they have a recap of like what you do and how you serve people. And then the current projects, that's more of a point of interest. And then at the very bottom, this gives you people an idea of your skills, experience, and passions, so they can see like what you're into, right? Like I've got, my LinkedIn stuff there, but I've also got, doing like Wim Hof breathing or cold showers or whatever. So, it just gives people more of a sense that, hey, this is a human being. They obviously have a successful business, but they also have a personal interest. So those are the main sections. Like I said, I'm going to update this later today, and I'll share it in our group. So if you want to check it out, but if you go to my profile and look under my documents that I posted, you can look at the current one. But I want to update this one and get some more eyeballs on it. So I'll share that one once I get it done.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. And again, guys, I think that the reason I'm calling everybody out on this is something that I really need to hone in on. I've done them before, but I haven't leveraged them. And for those of you that are like, well, when would I apply this? I don't want to just build this one pager and then just throw it on my LinkedIn and never use it again. Guys, this is extremely relevant when you're emailing or if you're in a networking group. I mean, if you just have a new introduction, it's a really simple way to just send that document and build that know, like, and trust. And also it just takes out the pressure, right? Like if, for example, I meet somebody and we have a 15-minute conversation and I'm like, I want to introduce them to this person. I think they'd be a good fit, but I actually don't know how to. I'm not 100% sure what they do. Well, now you have this one pager, you go back to it and it is, oh, look, well, this is what they do. Now I'm really comfortable. And it also saves me time. I don't have to think about what to say. I literally just copy paste it and I'm done. So again, I would love if you guys could knock this out between now and the next week. I'm going to do it myself. And I think this will be really powerful. I know that we will do a follow-up email. So if you guys have any questions for Matt directly, I don't want to speak for you, but I feel like he'd be pretty open to answering questions or doing feedback or things like that. So
100%. Yep. 100%. Thank you.
all right, guys. So we're about to close out. Does anybody on the call have any last minute questions, comments, stories, thoughts before we really wrap up?
Matthew,
really
I think you're in
awesome.
a
Thanks so
great
much,
spot to do the Wim Hof breathing, by the way. I love that's one of your interests, and you started with it's like -4 outside. So I think you're in a good spot, dude.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Matt. This was really helpful.
Yeah,
Took a
good
lot away
stuff.
from this.
Awesome. Thanks, Dylan. Thank you.
Yeah, guys. So, all right. So, for those of you that are new, because this is a paid group, we don't release the videos yet. We're going to hold on to those for a little bit. So if for whatever reason you do want access to that, let me know. If you have not already subscribed, I'd highly recommend checking out the YouTube. There's a lot of awesome videos on there. Again, I know that Matt, and if I can help you with this, absolutely let me know. But I believe Matt is going to get us on that group chat, and then also just be looking out for that one pager. If you guys have any questions, let me know or reach out to Matt directly. But thank you all so much. This was a very powerful topic. These are a lot of those little tiny nitty-gritty things that we don't always think about, but doing this little stuff now is going to absolutely change your game. I mean, honing in on that avatar, like Matt said, and then again, I would really challenge people, again, I'm going to do this myself, is to specifically focus on one area, one vertical for the next 90 days and just see what happens, And again, we want to be very specific. So I like the SMART acronym here: be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and then time. So again, when you're setting those goals for the 90 days, say, look, I'm looking for this exact person in this exact vertical, and then track that number, see what actually happens. So it's not just, hey, I want to do this and then throw it out there. Well, that's not a SMART goal, right? We want to be very specific and measurable and go back after that 90-day period and say, look, these are actually the results I had. Now we can compare those to the other results. The second part is, again, that one pager, and just being able to have a clear, concise message that we can share as professionals, or even if we're looking, I've heard it put this way as well. Maybe you're in the industry right now that you don't love and you want to make a change. Well, if you have that one pager, you can look for the people that are in the industry that you want to be in and gain access to those types of people. Same thing is true with your clientele. So again, just narrowing in on the avatar, knocking out that one pager. Matt, thank you so much for all the information. Everybody, thank you for being on this call. I love you guys. Have an amazing Tuesday, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You guys.
Bye.